Luis Perez is a nationally known expert on accessible materials. He makes an analogy between blueberry muffins and accessibility. If you have a muffin and dump blueberries on it, do you have a blueberry muffin? The answer, of course, is that the blueberries have to be mixed in with the muffin batter. Similarly, accessibility needs to happen during development of a material or lesson plan, not retrospectively. Here are some things we will be talking about today. First, we address when accessibility should be considered. Secondly, we'll discuss accessible and assistive technologies. Third, we will discuss the perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust framework. Finally, you will do a POR analysis. Let's get started. Why are we focusing on accessibility? In order to allow for full participation of all students, including those with disabilities, accessibility is the bare minimum needed. Those of you who are familiar with universal design for learning may recognize that accessibility is discussed alongside UDL. Accessibility is the starting point. In order for UDL to work without access, one cannot do UDL. When materials are flexible, they are less likely to create barriers to learning. Also, like we saw in the blueberry muffin analogy, it is most efficient to think about accessibility when you are designing instead of having to consider it later on. I have a bunch of accessibility considerations on this slide. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but I'll talk about a few. First, visual information can be supported throughout text for images, color contrasts, and not using a single color. One resource you can use is WebAIM''S Contrast Checker. For students who may be learning English or have a language-based learning or intellectual disability, look at the language level and make sure the directions are as easy to understand as possible. One resource you can use is Cambridge University Press's Language Level Checker. Let's check our knowledge. Why should accessibility be considered at the start? A. There's less need to retrofit. B. Because it is legally required. C. For creative purposes. Or D. Because it is more efficient. The correct answer is A. Less need to retrofit. Accessibility is required under federal and state laws and policies, but that isn't a reason to do it from the start. You might benefit creatively from considering accessibility, but not necessarily. Finally, while considering accessibility is more efficient than retrofitting, it doesn't necessarily make your overall design more efficient. Now, we will discuss assistive and accessible technologies. There are many ways to make lessons and materials more efficient. Sometimes, also, certain accessible and assistive technologies are needed. Assistive technologies are designed to improve the functional capabilities of a child with a disability. Accessible technologies are flexible hardware or software that provides access to accessible materials. I would like to pose a couple of reflection questions for your consideration. Can assistive technology, AT, be useful for people without disabilities? If so, what examples can you think of? Can a technology be an AT and not accessible at the same time? Why or why not? In this next section, we will discuss the POR framework. In previous sections, we talked about when to consider accessibility and about how accessible and assistive technologies can support accessibility efforts. How, though, can you tell if a product you are considering using in your lessons is accessible or not? One way is to use the POR framework. The POR framework is designed for evaluating accessibility. It stands for perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. When we talk about how perceivable something is, We are talking about how the content is physically presented. For instance, this might include closed captioning, the ability to zoom in on text, braille versions of the text, alt text for images, and so on. Questions you might ask when evaluating Perceivable include if there are options for audio and visual information. Also, the product be experienced in a tactile manner. The next principle is operable. Operable is about making sure that, no matter what technology is being used, people can experience it in the same manner. An example would be being able to navigate by mouse, keyboard, and voice. Questions for operable include: how does the learner navigate and interact? Is there a clear structure for activities? Is the device accessible? Flexible timing and pace? Flashing content that could trigger a seizure? The understanding principle is about making sure that directions and content is clear, translatable, and represented well. VEX Robotics, for instance, has a storybook for their VEX 123 for young children that presents them with a basic introduction and directions to the robot. Questions for understanding include: can learner understand the product? Are the directions simple and clear? Is there consistency? Is plain language used? Is the language used identified? The last principle is robust. Robust is making sure that content can be interpreted by a variety of technologies, which include assistive technologies. If you are doing something with online materials, you also want to make sure it works on various browsers, Chrome and Safari for instance, as well as various technologies such as computers, tablets, and smartphones. An example would be being able to program the same way on a computer or a tablet. Questions for robust include: is metadata, data on other data, collected? Is there a way to do an accessibility check? Is the product accessible for real people with disabilities? Can all students fully participate in the activity at all times? Here's a quiz. What would be an example of perceivable? A. Working memory. B. Giving visual descriptions. C. Making sure technologies connect. Or D. Ensuring clear structure. The correct answer is B. There is not really a mention of working memory in the core standards. Visual descriptions for important content deal with how content is physically presented, which is what perceivable is, so that is the correct answer. Answer C is related to the robust principle. Answer D is part of being operable. What would be an example of operable? A. Making sure technologies connect. B. Closed captioning. C. Ensuring clear structure. Or D. Ensuring real users with disabilities can use the product. The correct answer is C. A is part of robustness. Closed captioning relates to perceivable. D is also part of robustness. For your assignment for this module, you all are going to be doing a core analysis of the technology you use to teach coding. This can be any technology. I would suggest referring to the presentation as the questions can help you think through your technologies. Please provide as many positive areas and areas of improvement as possible. To sum up, let's review some takeaways. First, accessibility should be considered during the design, not retrospectively. Secondly, assistive and accessible technologies can be used to support accessibility. Finally, using core can help you make sure your lesson plans are more accessible. Thank you for your attention.